For months, the Whittaker controversy has continued to divide viewers across YouTube. Every new live stream, every interview, and every public statement seems to raise as many questions as it answers. But one question keeps resurfacing above all the others. Could the investigation surrounding the Whittaker project eventually expand beyond the people already facing scrutiny? That question has become even louder after a series of recent live streams discussing Eric Carroll's role in the events surrounding the family. None of these discussions provide final answers, and many of the claims remain disputed. But they do reveal why so many people continue following this story months after it first exploded. One of the latest discussions focuses on Eric's background before he ever became involved with the Whittaker family. Critics argue that understanding his past helps explain how he approached the situation in West Virginia. Supporters disagree, saying personal history should not automatically determine how current events are interpreted. One issue repeatedly raised involves Eric's advocacy work through Dad Talk Today. Supporters describe the project as an effort to help fathers dealing with difficult custody situations. Critics ask a different question. If someone builds a platform around helping families stay together, how should viewers interpret later involvement in a situation where another family ultimately became separated? That question does not automatically establish blame. It simply reflects the contrast many viewers have noticed between Eric's public mission and the controversy that followed. During recent discussions, critics pointed to Eric's own public statements about his personal custody experience. They argue those experiences shaped how he approached the Whittaker family. Others believe those two situations should never be compared because they involve completely different circumstances. The disagreement illustrates why this story has become so polarized. Some viewers see Eric as someone who stepped into an impossible situation, trying to help vulnerable adults. Others believe his involvement made an already fragile situation significantly worse. Neither perspective alone explains everything that happened. One recurring topic involves how quickly events escalated after additional people became involved with the family. Before national attention, the Whittakers had lived largely outside the spotlight for decades. Once online creators became involved, everything changed rapidly. Videos attracted millions of views. Donations began arriving. Plans for new housing were discussed publicly. Questions about finances emerged. Government agencies eventually became involved. Family members were later separated into different living arrangements. Each of those developments happened over a relatively short period compared to the decades that came before. Critics argue that this timeline deserves careful examination. Supporters argue that increased attention also brought resources, medical evaluations, and opportunities the family had never previously received. Both observations can exist simultaneously. Public attention often brings opportunities while also creating pressures that did not previously exist. That is one reason the Whittaker story remains so complicated. Another subject generating debate involves public perception. Several commentators have argued that Eric carefully presented himself as someone motivated primarily by compassion and service. Those critics now question whether his public image matched every decision that followed. Supporters reject that interpretation completely. They argue Eric devoted enormous amounts of time traveling, organizing resources, speaking with agencies, and trying to improve difficult circumstances. They believe his efforts are being unfairly judged through hindsight after events became controversial. Without complete documentation, it remains difficult for outside observers to determine which interpretation most accurately reflects reality. One point nearly everyone agrees on is that relationships between the adults involved eventually deteriorated completely. Public collaboration turned into public disagreement. Former allies began criticizing one another. Private conversations reportedly became public. Each new accusation prompted additional responses. Instead of resolving questions, every new statement created even more. Another important issue involves expectations. When audiences contribute emotionally or financially to an online project, they often expect transparency. Many viewers say they believe they were supporting improvements for the Whittaker family. As disagreements became public, those same viewers naturally began asking how decisions were made, who controlled different aspects of the project, and what documentation existed. Those questions are understandable regardless of where someone stands in the controversy. At the same time, asking questions should not be confused with reaching conclusions. Many claims made publicly by different participants remain disputed. Some involve financial issues. Others involve decision-making. Others concern interactions with government agencies. Each deserves evidence rather than assumptions. That distinction matters because public opinion often moves much faster than verified information. Another topic raised by commentators concerns leadership. Several critics argue that Eric frequently positioned himself as the person with answers, the organizer, or the decision-maker. Supporters instead describe those same actions as someone stepping forward when others would not. Leadership itself is rarely controversial. How leadership is exercised often becomes the real question. This debate becomes even more significant because vulnerable adults were involved throughout the story. Whenever vulnerable people become the focus of internet attention, expectations naturally increase. Viewers expect transparency. They expect accountability. They expect careful decision-making. When those expectations appear unmet, skepticism grows quickly. That is exactly what happened here. As months passed, discussions shifted away from entertaining videos and toward broader questions about responsibility. Who made major decisions? Who communicated with agencies? Who handled public messaging? Who managed donations or project planning? Those questions remain central to the ongoing public debate. Recent commentary has also focused on whether ongoing investigations could eventually produce additional developments. At this stage, publicly available information does not establish what future legal outcomes, if any, may occur. Speculation is widespread online, but speculation alone is not evidence. That distinction is important. Investigations, when they exist, often take time. Public commentary frequently moves much faster than official processes. Because of that, many unanswered questions remain exactly that, unanswered. For viewers trying to understand the controversy, patience is often more useful than certainty. The Whittaker story has already demonstrated how quickly assumptions can spread online before complete information becomes available. As additional interviews, live streams, and public statements continue appearing, audiences are left sorting through competing narratives. Some believe Eric deserves credit for trying to help. Others believe his actions deserve far greater scrutiny. Many remain undecided, waiting for additional verified information before reaching conclusions. Whatever position viewers ultimately take, one thing seems certain. The conversation has moved far beyond a simple story about internet creators visiting a rural family. It has become a broader discussion about responsibility, transparency, influence, and what happens when vulnerable people become the center of a viral online phenomenon. What do you think? Has the public debate become too focused on personalities instead of evidence? Or do the unanswered questions still deserve closer examination? Share your perspective in the comments. And if you enjoy thoughtful documentary-style breakdowns of complex stories, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next chapter. As the public debate intensified, another question gradually began replacing the original controversy. Instead of simply asking who was right or wrong, many viewers started asking a different question. How did a project that began with promises of helping the Whittaker family become a dispute between the very people who claimed to be working toward the same goal? That shift matters because, at the beginning, the public story looked remarkably simple. Videos showed members of the family enjoying outings, receiving gifts, and experiencing activities many viewers believe they had never had the opportunity to enjoy before. The audience saw smiles, road trips, shopping, restaurants, and plans for improving living conditions. Naturally, many supporters assumed everyone involved shared the same objective. But as time passed, that image became increasingly difficult to reconcile with what was happening behind the scenes. Former collaborators stopped appearing together. Public statements became more defensive. Questions about finances began replacing conversations about helping the family. Supporters who had once defended everyone involved suddenly found themselves choosing sides. That transformation did not happen overnight. It unfolded gradually through live streams, interviews, social media posts, and public disagreements that painted very different pictures depending on who was speaking. One recurring issue involved transparency. Viewers repeatedly asked whether there had ever been a clear plan explaining how revenue generated from Whitaker-related content would be handled. Different people referenced agreements, understandings, and expectations, yet very little documentation was released publicly that allowed independent observers to understand exactly how those arrangements worked. Because of that uncertainty, every new statement generated additional speculation. Some viewers concluded that missing information must indicate wrongdoing. Others argued that private financial arrangements should not automatically become public simply because internet audiences were interested. Neither position fully resolved the underlying concern. The audience had become emotionally invested in the family itself. Once people feel connected to vulnerable individuals, they naturally begin asking questions about how projects involving those individuals are managed. That reaction is understandable regardless of which side someone supports. Another subject that continued drawing attention was communication. Observers noticed that many explanations appeared only after criticism became widespread. Rather than answering every question immediately, participants often responded gradually through live streams, interviews, or comments made weeks or months after events occurred. That delay created another problem. Every unanswered question allowed speculation to grow. Every gap in the timeline became an opportunity for competing narratives. Instead of one clear story, the public was left trying to assemble dozens of different pieces from different sources. That is rarely an easy task. The situation became even more confusing because several commentators analyzing the controversy often reached completely different conclusions while discussing the same events. Some interpreted silence as evidence that someone had something to hide. Others viewed the same silence as reasonable advice while legal matters or investigations remained unresolved. Again, both interpretations existed simultaneously within the online discussion. The challenge for viewers was determining which explanations were supported by evidence and which reflected personal opinion. That distinction became increasingly important as more serious accusations began circulating online. Whenever allegations involve financial management, vulnerable adults, or government agencies, emotions naturally become stronger. Yet stronger emotions do not necessarily produce clearer answers. In fact, they often make careful analysis even more necessary. One interesting aspect of the controversy is how quickly public trust can change. At one point, many viewers appeared willing to give everyone involved the benefit of the doubt. As disagreements became public, that confidence began to erode. People who had previously celebrated collaborative efforts now questioned motivations. Supporters became critics. Critics became investigators. Entire channels emerged dedicated to reviewing timelines, comparing statements, and examining public records. Whether every conclusion reached by those channels is accurate remains a separate question, but their existence demonstrates how dramatically public perception shifted. Another important topic involves responsibility. When several adults participate in a project together, determining individual responsibility becomes difficult. Different participants often describe their own roles very differently. Some emphasize decisions they personally made. Others focus on actions taken by collaborators. Some argue they were following advice. Others insist they were leading efforts themselves. Without complete documentation, separating those responsibilities can be extremely challenging for outside observers. That complexity explains why many discussions continue months after the original events. Another theme that appears repeatedly throughout the controversy is expectations versus outcomes. The stated goal, according to public discussions, centered on improving life for the Whitaker family. Yet by the time public disagreements reached their peak, attention had shifted almost entirely away from that original objective. Instead of discussing housing improvements, viewers debated contracts. Instead of talking about family outings, audiences debated financial questions. Instead of focusing on future plans, conversations centered on who said what during live streams months earlier. That transformation illustrates how quickly internet projects can evolve once conflicts become public. It also raises broader questions extending beyond this specific case. How should creators manage projects involving vulnerable individuals? How transparent should fundraising or monetized content become? What responsibilities exist when audiences contribute financially or emotionally? Should every agreement be documented publicly, or do private arrangements deserve privacy even when public interest becomes intense? These are not simple questions. They apply far beyond one family or one controversy. Recent commentary has also emphasized another important point. Public opinion should not be confused with official findings. Online discussions often move rapidly. Legal or administrative processes generally move much more slowly. That difference can create frustration for audiences accustomed to immediate answers. Some viewers interpret delays as evidence that nothing is happening. Others argue that careful investigations naturally require time. Without access to official information, neither conclusion can be confirmed simply through speculation. Perhaps the most striking aspect of the entire controversy is that nearly everyone claims to have been acting in the family's best interests. Supporters of different individuals often repeat exactly the same principle, while disagreeing completely about how that principle should have been applied. That reality suggests the situation may be more complicated than many early discussions acknowledged. Good intentions alone do not guarantee good outcomes. Likewise, disagreements alone do not establish misconduct. Complex situations involving vulnerable adults, internet audiences, donations, and multiple creators rarely produce simple narratives. As additional interviews continue appearing, viewers are likely to hear more competing accounts. Each new statement may answer one question while raising several more. That pattern has defined the Whitaker controversy from the beginning. For anyone trying to understand the story objectively, the most useful approach may be separating three different categories. First, there are documented events that multiple sources agree occurred. Second, there are public claims made by different participants. Third, there are conclusions people draw based on those claims. Keeping those categories separate helps avoid confusing speculation with established fact. The controversy is still unfolding. Public statements continue. Questions remain. And many viewers are still waiting for clearer documentation before deciding where responsibility ultimately belongs. What is your view after following the story this far? Do you think the biggest issue is a lack of transparency, conflicting public narratives, or simply the difficulty of understanding a complicated situation from the outside? Share your thoughts respectfully in the comments. And if you enjoy careful, evidence-focused breakdowns of major internet controversies, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter. By this stage, the Whitaker controversy had become much bigger than a disagreement between a handful of creators. It had evolved into a case study of what can happen when internet fame, vulnerable individuals, public donations, and competing personalities all collide at the same time. Looking back at the timeline, one pattern becomes difficult to ignore. Almost every major turning point began with the same thing: a lack of shared information. Viewers rarely had access to complete records. Instead, they received fragments. A live stream here, a social media post there, an interview weeks later, a screenshot shared by someone else. Every new piece seemed important, but none of them told the entire story. As a result, audiences were left assembling the puzzle themselves. That process inevitably produced different conclusions. Some people became convinced they already knew exactly what had happened. Others argued that the public still lacked enough verified information to reach any firm conclusions. Both groups continued watching every new development, hoping the next interview or statement would finally provide clarity. Yet clarity remained elusive. One reason is that each participant naturally viewed events through a different lens. Someone involved in fundraising might focus on finances. Someone involved in caregiving might emphasize daily responsibilities. Someone involved with legal matters might prioritize safety or procedure. Each perspective highlights different parts of the story while leaving other pieces in the background. That makes complex situations especially difficult for outside audiences to evaluate. Another recurring issue throughout the controversy has been trust. Trust is difficult to build online, but surprisingly easy to lose. Many viewers originally supported the project because they believed it would improve life for the Whittaker family. Once disagreements became public, those same supporters began asking tougher questions. What agreements existed? Who made important decisions? Who communicated with agencies? How are plans changing over time? Those questions are not unusual. Whenever public support becomes part of a project, transparency naturally becomes more important. At the same time, transparency has limits. Not every private conversation belongs in public. Not every disagreement should automatically become entertainment. Balancing those realities has proven difficult throughout the Whittaker story. Perhaps the most important lesson from the entire controversy is how quickly vulnerable families can become the center of conflicts they never intended to join. The original focus was supposed to be the Whittakers themselves. Over time, however, the public conversation shifted toward creators, live streams, disagreements, and competing narratives. The family gradually became the subject of debates instead of the center of the story. That shift is worth reflecting on. When online attention becomes intense, even well-intentioned projects can become increasingly complicated. Public expectations grow. Criticism grows. Pressure grows. Eventually, every decision becomes subject to interpretation. Some viewers interpret actions generously. Others interpret the same actions skeptically. Neither reaction automatically establishes what actually happened. That is why documentation matters more than assumptions. Throughout this controversy, audiences have repeatedly demonstrated something important. People care about accountability, but they also care about fairness. Many viewers have said they want answers regardless of whose answers they turn out to be. That is a healthy instinct. Accountability should never depend on popularity, nor should criticism depend entirely on speculation. The strongest conclusions are always supported by evidence rather than emotion. Another lesson involves the role of content creators themselves. When creators become deeply involved in the lives of vulnerable individuals, the line between documenting events and influencing events can become increasingly blurred. Sometimes those roles overlap naturally. Sometimes they conflict. Recognizing that distinction is essential for anyone producing this kind of content. Future creators may learn valuable lessons from watching how this controversy unfolded. Clear expectations, written agreements, financial transparency where appropriate, defined responsibilities, consistent communication. Those practices cannot prevent every disagreement, but they can reduce confusion when difficult situations arise. As for the Whittaker story itself, many questions remain unanswered publicly. Some may eventually receive official clarification. Others may never be fully resolved. That uncertainty can be frustrating, but it is also a reminder that real life rarely provides neat endings. The internet often encourages people to choose heroes and villains. Reality is frequently more complicated. Different people can make good decisions in some moments and poor decisions in others. Good intentions do not always produce good outcomes. Likewise, criticism alone does not establish wrongdoing. The responsibility of viewers is to remain curious without becoming careless, skeptical without becoming cynical, and patient enough to distinguish evidence from rumor. Ultimately, perhaps the most important question is not who won the public argument. It is whether the family at the center of the story ultimately benefited from everything that happened around them. That question continues to resonate because it reminds everyone why the story attracted attention in the first place. The Whittakers were never simply characters in an online drama. They are a real family whose lives became the subject of extraordinary public attention. Whatever conclusions people eventually reach about the controversy, it is worth remembering that the family's well-being should remain the central concern rather than the ongoing conflict between creators. As new information continues to emerge, viewers will undoubtedly continue comparing statements, reviewing timelines, and debating different interpretations. Healthy discussion is valuable when it remains grounded in facts and respectful disagreement. The strongest analysis asks difficult questions while remaining open to new evidence. And that may be the lasting lesson of this entire story. It is a reminder that complicated situations deserve careful thinking rather than quick judgments, and that every new claim should be evaluated on the strength of its supporting evidence rather than on who delivers it. What are your thoughts after following this controversy from the beginning? Has your perspective changed as more public statements have emerged? Or do you think the biggest questions are still unanswered? Share your thoughts in the comments. Keep the discussion respectful. And if you enjoy thoughtful, evidence-based documentary breakdowns of complex stories, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next investigation.